What happens when the sun itself vanishes from the sky? This is the story of Amaterasu, her power, her pain, and her return. If this legend captures your imagination, tap like to share the light. Amaterasu, the light, returns. Chapter 1. The Goddess of the Rising Sun. In the beginning, before the first rice sprouted from the soil and before the wind knew its name, there was Amaterasu. She was light. She was warmth. She was life. Amaterasu, the goddess of the rising sun, was born from purity and power. She came from the left eye of Izanagi, the great creator god. From her first breath, light poured into the heavens. The sky shimmered, the seas sparkled. Mountains cast long golden shadows across the world below. The gods called her radiant, the mortals called her divine. And every day, when she opened her eyes, the sun rose. Amaterasu ruled over Takamagahara, the high plane of heaven. It was a place of golden skies, gentle winds, and divine harmony. Her palace shone with mirrors and silk. The light in her halls never flickered, for her presence was the source of all brilliance. She brought order to the world. She guided the seasons. She kept balance between day and night, between heaven and earth. She was not just a light in the sky. She was a leader. Amaterasu listened with care. She spoke with grace. And when she walked, the clouds moved to let her pass. The other gods respected her wisdom. Even the wild ones bowed their heads in her presence. Her touch brought calm. Her voice brought peace. But even light casts a shadow. And in the shadow of her glory stood her brother, Susanoo. Susanoo was the god of storms. He was fire and flood, roar and rage. Born from Izanagi's nose, his spirit was wild and unruly. Where Amaterasu brought harmony, Susanoo brought chaos. Still, they were family. Still, Amaterasu loved him. She believed he could change. She hoped he would learn. One day, the gods called a great meeting. Susanoo had been summoned to explain himself. He had grown restless. He had shaken the oceans with his temper. He had blown away prayers with his howling winds. Before the divine assembly, Susanoo swore to calm his ways. Amaterasu watched him closely. "Brother," she said, "if your heart is sincere, show it not in words, but in action." Susanoo nodded, and for a moment it seemed the storm would pass. To prove his change, Susanoo challenged Amaterasu to a test of purity. They each broke a sacred sword and jewels, breathing life into them. From these pieces, divine spirits emerged, gods born of breath and will. The test was meant to show truth. Whoever birthed the purer spirits would be deemed honest. Amaterasu's spirits were gentle, golden, full of grace. Susanoo's spirits were fierce, loud, restless. Still, the gods declared Amaterasu the victor. And that is when the winds shifted. Jealousy burned in Susanoo's heart. He stormed from the palace, his feet shaking the clouds. He galloped across the sky like thunder, wild and furious. Amaterasu watched him go. Her heart trembled, but she held her place. For now. Below in the mortal realm, farmers planted under her light. Children played in her warmth. The oceans followed her rise and fall. She gave life without asking for thanks. But the skies were beginning to change. One night, as the stars blinked across the heavens, Amaterasu stood on the edge of her realm. She looked out over the world, quiet and golden. The wind touched her cheek. Something in it had changed. It carried soul, and fire, and sorrow. She knew. Her brother was not finished. Still, she remained strong. "Even in shadow," she whispered, "the sun will shine again." But deep in her heart, a chill had begun to grow. Chapter 2. The Storm, God's Rage. Above the clouds, in the golden halls of Takamagahara, Amaterasu kept watch. Below, her light stretched across mountains and seas. The world moved in peace, for now, but the storm was rising. Susanoo, god of storms, had not found peace. Though he had promised change, his heart burned with pride and resentment. He was tired of being second, tired of being compared, tired of the sun shining brighter than his storm. He had watched Amaterasu win the trial of truth, watched the gods praise her grace, watched the light fall on her shoulders like a crown, and something broke in him. He roared across the heavens. Thunder rolled with every step. He cast off his calm like a broken mask. "I am not lesser," he shouted. "I am storm. I am sea. I am fury." Susanoo raced through the skies. He trampled rice fields planted in his sister's name. He tore down sacred halls. He flung fire into forests and laughed when the trees cracked. Mortals fled in fear. The gods turned their eyes away. None dared stop him. At last, Susanoo came to the heavenly weaving hall, the sacred place where Amaterasu's maidens spun robes for the gods. There, under golden beams, they worked in peace, until the doors crashed open. Susanoo stormed in with wild eyes. "Not to harm," he said, just to prove his strength, but storms do not enter quietly. With a great crash, he shattered the roof. A sacred pony, a divine creature, was flung into the room, lifeless and broken. The weaving maidens screamed. One fell, struck by her own loom. Silk spilled like blood across the floor. The hall fell silent. Only the wind, cold and sharp, remained. Amaterasu heard the cries. She rushed to the hall. Her steps were swift, but not swift enough. What she found broke her heart. The weaving room lay in ruin. The maidens wept. The sacred threads were torn. And Susanoo, her brother, stood in the wreckage, unrepentant. Their eyes met. "You have gone too far," Amaterasu whispered. Susanoo spat on the ground. "I showed strength. Is that not what the gods admire?" Amaterasu said nothing, but her light began to dim. She turned from him, turned from the gods, turned from the sky. With sorrow burning inside her like a second sun, she walked away, past the gates of heaven, past the shining halls, into the mountains of the high plain, to a place untouched by voices or eyes. There, she stood before the mouth of a cave, dark and silent. The heavenly rock cave, a sacred place of retreat and mourning. She stepped inside and pulled the stone shut behind her. The world held its breath. Without Amaterasu, the sun did not rise. Without her, light had no master. Darkness fell, not just over the heavens, but across the earth. The gods trembled. The wind stilled. The sea turned black. Susanoo stood alone in the silence he had made. He called her name, but no answer came. Not from the cave, not from the sun. He had won nothing, and lost everything. In the mortal world, night stretched on. The crops withered, children cried. The forests grew cold. The birds no longer sang. A single act of pride had stolen the day from the world. Chapter 3. The Cave of Silence Darkness, thick as smoke, cold as stone. That was all the world knew after Amaterasu vanished. Inside the heavenly rock cave, she sat in silence. The cave swallowed her light. It wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. No warmth, no wind, no song. Only the steady sound of her breath. Slow, steady, alone. She had come here not out of anger, not even out of fear, but out of sorrow. Her brother, whom she had trusted, had torn her sacred place, had shattered peace, had mocked what she held dear. She felt broken. And so, the sun turned inward. Outside the cave, the world suffered. Day did not come. The birds forgot their voices. The rivers moved like cold veins under a grey sky. The rice fields dried. Mortals looked to the heavens, but the heavens did not answer. The gods met in the center of Takamagahara. For the first time, the sun did not warm their golden halls. Amaterasu was their light, their compass. Without her, they felt lost. They sat in a circle, 12 gods, all wise, all afraid. "What can be done?" asked Omakane, the god of wisdom. "She is hidden by sorrow," said one. "She is bound by shame," said another. "But if she does not return," whispered a third, "neither will the light." Some blamed Susanoo. Most remained silent. He had vanished from the halls of the gods, exiled and alone. The gods wept, not just for their sister, but for the people below, the farmers, the children, the trees that bent in darkness. They sent offerings to the cave, pearls, sweets, perfumed smoke. But Amaterasu did not stir. Inside the cave, she listened to the silence. It was not empty. It had voices, small ones, her own regrets, her own doubts, her own questions. Was I wrong to leave? Did they ever truly see me? Will the world ever need my light again? These thoughts wrapped around her like vines. Her light, once bright as dawn, was now a soft flicker inside her chest. Still, the world turned. But it turned in shadow. And so the gods returned to the circle. They knew that words would not reach her. But perhaps something else could. It was Omoikane who spoke first. "Let us remind her of joy," he said, "not through sorrow, not through tears, but through laughter." The gods looked at one another. It was bold, it was strange, but perhaps it was the only way. They gathered sacred items, great mirror, polished until it could hold the sun, strings of shining jewels, bright as falling stars, and most importantly, a stage. And upon that stage, they placed Ame no Uzume, the goddess of dance and dawn. She was not afraid of the dark. She was not afraid of silence. She was not afraid of making fools smile. The gods gathered outside the cave. The mirror was hung on a tree. Torches blazed. The drums began to beat. Soft, slow, steady. And then Uzume began to dance. She stomped, she laughed, she spun in wild circles. She lifted her robes and shouted jokes no god had dared speak before. The gods burst into laughter. And inside the cave, Amaterasu heard it. Laughter, drums, joy. She frowned. How could they laugh without the sun? Was there light out there? Had they moved on? Curiosity stirred. It was the first thing to reach her since she had shut herself away. Quietly, carefully, she stepped toward the stone. Just enough to peek out. And when she did, she saw something astonishing. Her own reflection, shining in the mirror. Golden, radiant, whole. She gasped. It was her, but also something more. Something joyful, something free. Behind the mirror, the gods held their breath. Amaterasu stepped closer, and in that moment, they moved. Quick as wind, gentle as sunrise, they pulled the stone aside. Light spilled out. Not just from the sky, but from Amaterasu herself. And the darkness began to lift. Chapter 4. A World Without Light. Before the sun returned, the world endured a silence deeper than night. When Amaterasu hid herself in the cave, the sky did not just darken. It stopped breathing. Time slowed. The air grew thick. The stars refused to shine. At first, the mortals thought it was only a passing storm. They lit lanterns. They whispered prayers. They waited for morning. But morning never came. Days passed, or what they called days, for the sky gave no hint. The rice fields wilted. The blossoms shriveled on their stems. The wind carried no warmth. Fishermen could not see the sea. Children forgot what the sun felt like. The elders watched the clouds and said, "The gods are hiding from us." They were right. The priests climbed mountains. They built fires. They offered fruits, feathers and poems. They begged the sun to return, but the sky remained empty. No gold, no blue, only grey, stretched thin like forgotten cloth. In Takamagahara, the high plane of heaven, the gods were restless. Without Amaterasu, even the sacred halls dimmed. The golden threads in her palace faded. The birds of paradise fell silent. The gods argued. "Send warriors into the cave," said one. "Let her be," said another. "She will return in time." But time was a strange thing now. With no sun to measure it, hours dripped like melting wax. Omoy Khan, god of wisdom, sat alone beneath a withered tree. He listened to the silence. He watched the shadows stretch. He thought of the mortals. How small they must feel. How afraid. And somewhere in the distant lands of heaven, Susanoo, the storm god, wandered. Exiled from the sky, cast out for his fury. He felt no triumph, only shame. He had torn the light from the sky, not with his sword, but with his pride. He walked through forests of blackened pine, through rivers that no longer sparkled, through winds that carried only silence. He called Amaterasu's name into the darkness, but it did not answer. He remembered the laughter of the weaving maidens, the soft golden halls, his sister's eyes, not cold, but steady, kind, and now, only cold. The gods met again, this time not with pride, but with grief. They circled a single candle. It flickered against the wind. "We have lost her," one whispered. "We have lost ourselves," said another. But Uzume, goddess of dawn and dance, sat with her back to the circle. She stared into the grey sky and smiled. "She's not gone," Uzume said. "She's listening." The gods fell silent. "She hides," said Uzume, "because we wounded her. She gave the world her light, and we let it be broken. She needs to see joy again, not fear, not shame, not silence." And so the gods looked inward. They saw their own failings, their silence during Susanoo's rage, their slowness to act, their fear. And then they looked outward, at the empty sky, and the people far below, gathered around dying fires. Something had to change. The gods stood as one. It was not enough to beg Amaterasu to return. They had to remind her why the world was worth lighting. They gathered sacred tools, a mirror that could catch her face, a string of star-bright jewels, and a drum that carried the heartbeat of the earth. They prepared not a plea, but a celebration. And while they worked, the world waited. No dawn, no birds, no sun on the mountains, only stillness, only hope. Chapter 5. The Mirror and the Dance. The gods stood at the edge of the cave, not to beg, not to fight, but to invite. They had tried silence, they had tried sorrow. Now they would try joy. Omoy Kane, wise and steady, gave instructions. Her heart is wounded. We must show her that the world still laughs, still dances, still needs her light. In their hands, they carried sacred tools. A mirror, polished until it shone like the sun. Jewels, strung like drops of fire. A drum carved from sacred wood. And a rope, braided with prayers, to close the cave behind her, once she stepped out. Not to trap, but to guide her home. They chose Emino Uzume to lead them. She was the goddess of dawn, of joy, of laughter without shame. Where others bowed in silence, she stomped her feet. Where others whispered prayers, she threw her arms wide and sang. "Let me make her smile," Uzume said. "Let me remind her of the light inside her, the part she forgot when the world turned cold." The gods cleared a space before the cave. The mirror was placed on a tree. The jewels hung nearby, glinting in the torchlight. The drum began to beat, soft, low, steady. Then Uzumi stepped forward, barefoot, smiling, unashamed. She began to dance. It was not the careful dance of a court priestess. It was wild, bold, joyful. She lifted her robes. She stamped her feet. She laughed, a laugh like water tumbling over stones, like thunder made of joy. The gods gasped, then laughed too. It echoed across the mountaintop. Not mockery, not cruelty, just joy, just life. Inside the cave, Amaterasu stirred. She had not heard laughter in what felt like forever. It rolled across the stones. It warmed the silence. It reached her in a way no offering ever had. Her heart ached, not from pain, but from something older. Curiosity. She moved closer to the cave's mouth, just a little, just enough to hear the drums, the laughter, the dancing feet. Her hand brushed the edge of the stone. She peeked through a crack and froze. There, hanging from the tree, was the mirror. And in the mirror, a light, her own. For the first time in ages, she saw herself. Not shadowed, not withdrawn, not lost, whole, radiant, golden. The light did not come from the sky. It came from her. The gods saw her silhouette. Omoikene nodded. Now 2 gods moved quietly, reverently. They took the rope and placed it behind her. Not to seal her in, but to make sure she could not vanish again. The sun had seen herself. Now she had to step forward. Amaterasu opened the stone just a little more. The light from the mirror wrapped around her like silk. Uzumi twirled, caught her eye, and smiled. Amaterasu blinked, then smiled back. The gods gasped. Then they bowed. Low, grateful. And in that moment, she stepped into the world again. The mountain lit with golden fire. The trees shimmered. The sky burst open like a flower in bloom. Light returned, not just to the heavens, but to every heart that had waited in the dark. Down below, mortals woke to a sky painted in soft gold. Children pointed, old women wept. Farmers fell to their knees and kissed the earth. The sun had returned. She had seen the world, still knew joy, still held hope. And all it took was laughter at the mouth of a cave. Chapter 6. The first light returns. The stone was open. The cave was behind her. And Amaterasu stood beneath the sky once more. Her eyes blinked slowly in the golden light. Her feet touched the earth as if for the first time. And though the sky had waited long, it welcomed her without question. She looked at the gods who had gathered. They did not speak. They did not cheer. They simply bowed, deep, low, reverent. Their silence spoke louder than words. It said, "We missed you. We're sorry. We need your light." Amaterasu did not answer right away. Her gaze drifted to the mirror, still catching her reflection, to Uzumi, still spinning, her feet leaving prints in the dirt, to the rope placed behind her, soft but sure. She understood. They had feared losing her again. But they had chosen joy, not force, laughter, not sorrow. And that choice had brought her back. She raised her hand. The mirror caught it, gold on gold. And then the sun rose, not just in the sky, but across the land. The world, which had crouched in waiting, now stood tall. Mountains glowed, oceans shimmered, trees lifted their arms and sighed. In the mortal world, bells rang in temples. Fishermen dropped their nets and stared at the sea, now silver blue. Farmers danced in the fields, their hands outstretched to catch the sun like a gift. Children lifted their faces and smiled. Even the animals turned to the sky as warmth wrapped around their backs. The sky had been silent too long. Now it sang. The gods led Amaterasu back to Takamagahara. The halls, once dim, now sparkled. The birds of paradise returned to their golden nests. The silk banners lifted in a breeze, warm with welcome. The sun goddess stepped into her palace. It had waited for her. It remembered her footsteps. And still, she said nothing. She walked to her sacred seat and sat beneath a roof of light. The gods remained outside. They knew this was her moment, not theirs. She closed her eyes. She listened. Not to silence, but to the quiet hum of a world alive again. She felt the prayers rise like smoke, the songs whispered from valleys, the steady beat of footsteps across the land. And she remembered why she had ever given her light in the first place. Not for praise, not for power, but to nurture, to protect, to guide. Slowly, she opened her eyes. The golden doors of her palace opened wide, and for the first time in many days, the light of Amaterasu filled the heavens completely. Outside, the gods wept. Not tears of grief, but of relief, of joy, of balance restored. Even Susanoo, far away in exile, felt it. He looked up at the sky and covered his face. He had never missed the sun until he had caused its absence. He whispered her name, Amaterasu. And for a moment, he did not feel angry, or proud, or wild. He felt small and grateful. Later, Susanoo would seek redemption. He would fight monsters. He would earn his place again. But that is another story. For now, the sun had returned, and the world had remembered how to breathe. Amaterasu spoke only once that day, to the mirror. She looked into it and said, "Even the light must rest, but it will always rise again." The gods carved a record of what had passed, not just the darkness, but the dance, the mirror, the laughter, and the rope that reminded them all to never let the light slip away unnoticed again. They built a shrine where the mirror once hung, a place where people could come to reflect, to bow, to thank the sun not just for warmth, but for returning. Chapter 7. The Lessons of the Sun. The world remembered. Even after the sun returned, the memory of darkness stayed behind. It lived in the trees that had grown still, in the fields that had withered, then healed, in the silence that once wrapped the sky like a veil. But it also lived in something greater, in gratitude. Every morning when the sun rose, people looked up, not out of habit, but with awe. The farmers whispered a soft, "Thank you." The children reached their hands toward the light. The elders smiled and closed their eyes, feeling warmth against their weathered skin. The world had known the dark, and so it cherished the light. In the heavens, Amaterasu ruled with calm. Her laughter was quieter now, her gaze softer. But her light had grown deeper, not just bright, but wise. She had seen what silence could do. She had felt what happens when the giver of light is taken for granted. She now rose each day, not out of duty, but with purpose, to warm, to heal, to witness. The gods, too, had changed. They had learned to listen, to act with care, to honor not just the sun's power, but her heart. Uzume danced more often now, not to call back the sun, but to celebrate that she had stayed. Omoikane taught the story in quiet halls, reminding young gods that wisdom is born from listening, not shouting. Even the mirror was given a place of reverence, not as a tool of vanity, but as a symbol of reflection, to see oneself, truly, clearly, kindly. As for Susanoo, he wandered. He fought monsters. He saved lives. He built shrines in forgotten places. But in every prayer, he whispered, one name remained at the center: Amaterasu. He never asked for forgiveness. He sought to earn it, step by step, act by act. And though they did not meet again for a long time, Amaterasu knew. She saw his efforts. She saw his sorrow. She saw the storm, softened by time. Sometimes a sister's light shines even on those who once broke it. In the mortal realm, stories passed from mouth to mouth, from grandmother to grandchild, from priest to pilgrim. They spoke of the time the sun vanished, of the laughter that saved the world, of the mirror that showed the truth, and of the rope that held hope in place. Shrines rose in Amaterasu's name. Mirrors were placed at their heart. People came not just to pray, but to reflect, to remember that light is not promised, it is protected. Seasons turned. Generations passed, but the sun always rose. Even now, in this world of cities and screens, of noise and rush, her story remains. You can see it in the first light touching a mountain peak, in the hush of dawn, in the golden glow on a child's face as they step outside. You can hear it in morning bird song, in laughter around a table, in the quiet moment when someone chooses joy, even when they could have chosen anger. Amaterasu lives not only in the sky, but in us. Every time you forgive, every time you return from silence, every time you light the way for someone else, she rises again. So when you see the sun tomorrow, pause. Let the light touch your face. Let it remind you, even the brightest souls can break, but they can also rise. Let it remind you to be gentle with the light in others, and even gentler with the light in yourself. Because even the sun once needed a mirror, a dance, and the laughter of friends to find her way home. Thank you for joining us on this journey through silence, sorrow, and the return of the sun. Stories like this remind us of the power of reflection, community, and light, even in the darkest moments. If this tale resonated with you, leave a comment with your favorite moment, and don't forget to like the video. Thank you for watching, and subscribe for more lore and lunacy.